All right.
Kinda, yeah.
She read it.
Did you read it?
No, I swear.
So, investment companies buy stocks from many companies, okay? So they have a better chance of being profitable. So in a sense, if you were going to, like our, what we consider our 401k here at Galen, you know, like your retirement fund, everybody else would call it that. We don't necessarily call it that, but mine would be divided into those kind of funds. So I give them, or they take out a percentage of my check to put into there, and then the school matches it, and then you can basically go to that broker or whatever. In this case, it would be like an insurance company or whoever set up your retirement fund, and you would tell them how aggressive you want to be. So I'm pretty mellow. So I told them that, so they would then divvy it up between all those kind of companies that they're gonna make you money, but it's not gonna be anything drastic, but they're gonna pretty consistently make you money. So then you could say, well, I wanna be really aggressive, and then yours would fluctuate a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? But basically, yeah, so you're splitting your money up into different areas, and you're not just concentrating on all of your stocks into one thing, or all of whatever. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Companies use the investors' money to do this, all right? And there's many different kinds, like I said, so you can be aggressive, you can be nice and kind of conservative, you can be totally just, you know, straight lined, and you're gonna make kind of the bare minimum, but it's gonna be steady. That's totally up to you. At the beginning, and you can change this year in and year out, so they would tell you, hey, your date to relook at your package is coming up, and you can make your phone call and then say, all right, at the beginning, a lot of young people would be aggressive because they want to make money, right? Me in the middle, I'm going to be, you know, I want to make money, but, you know, and then towards the end, it might just, you would say, hey, I'm there, I just want to keep a consistent, I want to make 1% or whatever it happens to be. And so they would divvy that up into the certain kinds. So when you do mutual fund trading, there's two different things, and it's based on net asset values. So again, this is one of those vocabulary terms that you got to make sure of. What are net assets of a company? It would be whatever we have in the fund's investment minus any debts. Okay, so your net assets of your company is, am I making more money than I'm spending? That's my net assets. So this leads us to something called, what they in the book will call the NAV a lot, N-A-V, which is the net asset value, which is found by dividing your net assets by the number of shares held by your stockholders. So that number might differentiate quite a bit, especially between company and company. Both of those numbers, right? My net assets, the startup companies are probably going to not have as many assets as Google or, you know, Coke or whatever. And then the stockholders would be the same thing. So for an example, if my net assets for the company that we're talking about is $10 million, and we have 500,000 shares that gets $20 or we have 500,000 shares, which are the stockholders in our company, we would take those two numbers and divide them. So we're basically saying our worth is $20 per share. That makes sense? So that's what you're going to have to do today. Try to figure out what things are worth. And that where Merrick's at 309, that little chart on 309 is what you would look at. So notice there's two different things in that one. Obviously, they show you the NAV and then something called the offer price. Okay, so notice there's always a difference. Well, how this comes about is there's two main types of funds. And whatever, we always get a kind of a chuckle here. We got a loaded fund and a no-load fund. Okay, so if there's a no-load fund, this is something that you would do without a commission. So you would do these kind of transactions without, it's bought directly from the mutual company, and you would always use your NAV price. So this is where you got to really make sure that you understand this. No load funds, you're going to use the NAV price. All right? The other one is a loaded fund. So why is it loaded? Well, now, not only do I have to pay my NAV price, I also have to pay some commission to it. All right, so again, my commission's included. This could be bought by a broker, like we said, usually it is. But again, you could go through this process and do what we were talking about the other day with that online stuff. So again, if you were invested in these kind of things. But notice here, we would, if you're talking about loaded funds, you're always going to use the offer price. So if you looked at this, and let's just take the first company in the chart, Ameris Growth. See how there's two different prices? The NAV is $10.12, and the offer price is $10.96. So basically, you can see how much they're charging for a commission, right? The commission is the difference between those two numbers. So what are they charging us? 84 cents, right? Okay, so again, these would all be loaded funds except for the ones that say NL, right? If it says NL, it's just no load, so you'd go back and you would use just the NAV, right? Otherwise, you're always going to use the offer price. That makes sense to everybody? Okay? So to find the total investment, we're going to use that chart, and we're going to take the price depending on what kind of fund it is and multiply by the number of shares. So this is a lot like what we did the other day, right? We're just taking the number of shares and how much each one of them costs us, and you just have to then go back to the chart and see. If there's two numbers, always use the offer price for the one that's, because you want to include the commission in it. All right? That's basically what you're going to do in the little section. Okay? If you want to find the rate of commission, what's it mean again if we say the rate? We want to find the what? A percent, right? So the rate of commission would, at the end of each quarter or whatever, Yah would want to know how much percentage he's making. So he's making, one quarter he's making 2%, the next quarter he's making 8%. So that he knows automatically the funds that they used that second time, they just had a better quarter. Makes sense, right? So again, you think back into the pandemic year and the difference between a lot of those funds would have been drastic, right? During that thing, everybody's went down just because there wasn't anything going on. But the few companies that were still, supplying Walmart and that, they were staying steady because, or even going up because they could raise their prices because that was the demand. So if you were involved or your mutual funds were involved in those companies, you were still doing well. That makes sense? So we're looking for a rate. Notice here, the rates usually are between 3 and 8%. So some kind of increase or decrease of 3 to 8%. What we're going to do now to find the rate of commission, obviously anytime we're looking for a decimal, which we can turn into a percent, so we're going to have to do what operation? We're going to divide, right? And we're going to have some smaller number on top of a bigger number. So what numbers are we going to use? To find the amount of commission you want to take the NAV price and subtract it from the offer price. So again, go back to that green chart. I'm going to subtract those two numbers. The NAV and the offer price, so we get that basically amount of commission. And then we're going to, and this is the key to this, make sure of this right here. You're always going to divide by the offer price. Divide by the offer price. Okay? So it's always the bigger price when you're going to do these kind of problems. Right? And then when you get that answer, that's going to give you the percentage that you're making of money. So in this first example, if we go, or when we go back, they're going to make 4.3%, which is a good increase, right? And then finding the profit or the loss. When shares are sold back to the company or redeemed, we're looking for, again, remember the vocabulary word in this would be the proceeds, right? Proceeds always means how much money am I making? So we're looking at the proceeds and taking the net asset values times the number of shares. Then obviously, again, notice this, you're going to use the NAV number for both. So in this case, you're going to go back and use that first column instead of the offer price. Because notice in the offer price, they don't always have one, especially the no-loaded funds, so you don't have anything to actually use with that, so they always want to use the NAV to figure out your profit or your thing. And then you're going to obviously multiply it by the number of shares that you had. And for me to have a proceed, whatever I spent should hopefully be under whatever we're making at the end. And then we're gonna subtract those two things and see how much money we make, okay? And again, if it's a proceed, it means that that's good. We made money. If it's a loss, obviously, it's a negative number, okay?
Yeah.
So a lot of different things, I mean, you know, again, this whole class is a little bit more of an introductory kind of things, but that's essentially what you're doing and how you can pick those kind of things that you would want to maybe ask your mutual people to do. So, like for myself, I don't really have any clue about any of it, so I don't go and sit down with them and try to readjust what I'm doing, because I have no idea. I'm not interested in that. That's why we have people that do that, right? But maybe you're interested in doing that, so you would be in charge of then reorganizing people's kind of portfolio of what they're taking into each of their mutual funds.
Same concept, just different vocabulary.
Yeah, in a sense, yes. Okay, so let's go through a couple examples. Page 310. Again, if you need it written so you can see it, no, not a problem. A, I don't know if it's a man or a woman. I can't. Shizu purchased 400 shares of no-load melon technology at a NAV of $17.35. What was her total investment in the fund? So basically, I'm just doing what? Multiplying those two things, right? Again, they made this one easy because they told you that it was that you're using the NAV. Nicholas bought 1,000 shares of a loaded fund. Its offering price was $26.74. What was his total investment? Again, the same thing. So again, if they didn't give you those prices, you would go back to that chart. When it says a no load, you're always going to use the NAV or the first column. If it says an offering price, you're going to use that second column. Okay? C and D, Rosser Mid-Cap Fund has a NAV of 945 and an offer price of 987. What is the rate of commission? That was actually the one that was done up on the board. Okay? So if you want to see the math, that would have been this right here. I'm going to subtract the two numbers, 987 minus 945, get that decimal, and then divide it by the offer price. Always the bigger number, okay? And then just make sure that you read the directions to see if they tell you what to round to. Right? Again, tens is the first spot, hundreds, then thousands, okay? So do you want to go through and do D by yourself? Or do we need to do D? So we're going to do what? 4518 and 43, what was the number?
43 is 6.
Thank you. So I'm going to do what with those two numbers? Subtract them. 1.32 divided by big number or little number?
Big number.
Big number, right? Always a bigger number. So we get what? 2.9%. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So again, the most important part of that is always to use this big number on the bottom or the number on the right-hand side, the offer price. Okay? And again, we want to do that because we want to include the commission in there. It's the rate of commission. And then last but not least, we're going to figure out if we made money or lost money. So letter E. Upon graduation, Todd redeemed 300 shares of a mutual fund of $17.22. His total investments in the shares was $4,391.10. Was his profit or a loss? So what are we going to do?
300 times $17.22.
Perfect.
Subtract that from.
Right. So, and again, I would always do whatever the redeem price was first. And then if it's a positive number after you subtract, you know that you made money. If it's a negative number after you subtract, then you know that you lost. That way you don't really have to think about it. You're just doing the same process over and over, and you're just looking at the sign of the number at the end. But you can do it however you want too. If it makes sense to you, then you can just do it. So what do we do for Todd here?
You had a profit of $774.09.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody okay, or do you need to see it up there?
All good.
All good?
England.
Basically the same thing for Pingling,
England,
Right.
Shane.
okay? So again, in this case right here, if I take the 500 times 39.45 and then subtract 19,000, I'm gonna automatically get a negative number. And once I get a negative number, I know that unfortunately we have to call Pingling and tell her she lost money. Alright?
It's a dude.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Must
sorry.
be him in the picture.
Sorry, Pingling.
Penguin.
Pingling Shang.
I don't look like England.
Sorry, I did not mean to disrespect him.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was a woman.
Maybe it's a.
Alright, any questions?
No, sir.
Alright, so we still got about 15 minutes, you might get a big chunk, but not all of this done. What did you say?
I don't know.